Today on UVA Legends podcast, I have Madeline Walsh. Madeline worked in the UVA's NIL department with my good friend Lo Davis for a few years, and she's been working in UCLA in their NIL as assistant director of NIL at UCLA for the last couple of years. And recently, she's decided to go off on her own and do other things. But I wanted to get together with Madeline and talk about the state of NIL and what she's found in her travels. Madeline, great to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course. So, well, first of all, when I talked to Lo, it was a few years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago now. He mentioned you in the interview, which is how we connected, and he said he brought you on. So, at the time, NIL was thought of as name, image, and likeness. And it was just a way for an athlete to benefit off their image and their
Mhm.
brand and whatever. Um, it's the whole world has changed so much in these last 2 or 3 years. Um, just before we start talking about it, how has NIL changed in the 3 years that you've been working, or 2 or 3 years you've been working in the field?
Mhm. For sure. So I think what NIL was intended to be was influencer marketing for student athletes, right? They could become influencers, leverage their platform, work with brands. And so that is still pretty much the same and will continue to be the same. But what we've seen and what happened very quickly at the beginning was that a different kind of NIL emerged, which was donor funded opportunities. And so that's where we saw collectives pop up, merchandise sales, autograph sales, meet and greets, these fan engagement opportunities with usually a lot of donor money behind them. And so there's always been these like two types, which is what I always tell people. There's true NIL with brands, and then there's donor funded NIL. And I think those two types are just getting further and further and further apart. We've seen, people have pretty much embraced donor funded NIL as pay for play and reading between the lines with that. And now we're seeing revenue share directly between schools and athletes coming down the line. So I think NIL, whichever definition you want to use, isn't going anywhere, but it's just been interesting to see the resources put behind helping athletes with their brand and their social media and getting these sponsorship deals versus the resources put behind fundraising and recruiting and using NIL in that way. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Yeah. Well, Madeline, you're a USC graduate of, I believe, class of 2020, international relations, cum laude. You got a master's of education from UVA before you joined, probably while you worked in NIL, and then you came back and worked for UCLA. First of all, and then I saw the note that you posted on Instagram saying you'll always be a Bruin. Well, first, USC and UCLA is a bitter rivalry. You
I
will
know.
always be a Bruin. Did you hear from some friends about that? And they're like, excuse me, you're a Trojan first, and you won't always be a Bruin.
They've been giving me a hard time since I accepted the job 2 years ago. So I definitely I get it from my Trojan friends and my Bruin friends. They haven't forgiven me for going to USC. My USC friends haven't forgiven me for working here, but I have loved it. I probably should have said I'll always be a Bruin fan. But what's funny is that my little sister is actually on the rowing team at UCLA, and so I tell people it's in the family. I gotta support her, and I've had such a good experience that I claim all of LA now.
Okay. How big a rivalry is USC UCLA? Is it Duke, North Carolina? Is it a massive rivalry?
No, well, I'll say this. UVA Virginia Tech was a way better rivalry. That was so much fun to be a part of because it's so much more intense. I think there's a lot of overlap between USC and UCLA because we're not that far apart. You put the rivalry aside and people have friends at those schools and we go back and forth. A lot of staff go back and forth. But when I got to UVA, it was like, we do not talk about Virginia Tech. We do not go there. We do not like them. And I loved that. I love that energy. So I still hate on Virginia Tech every chance I get as a true who.
Yeah, I think that's more of a California thing. And UVA, it's more of East Coast, even a Southern thing. These
Mhm.
rivalries, I think Californians are kind of above such um, uh, trivialities. uh, Real quickly, did you enjoy your time at UVA? Was it a big change, a culture change for you to come east? Come east?
Yeah, I loved it. I had never been to Charlottesville before I accepted my first job with the football team. And so it was a bit of a blind leap, but I got so lucky. And I made really amazing friends there that I'm still very close with. So it was an easy transition in that sense. And everyone was so kind and welcoming, but it was different. I had to learn about um, it's a Pepsi place. That was different. Like just the loyalties there. And then um being in a smaller town after living in LA for a few years, that was definitely an adjustment, but it's hard not to love it. So I miss it a lot actually.
Where did you grow up?
Seattle.
Oh, okay,
So
so you're
I
West
bounced
Coast.
around. Yeah, and that's why I decided to come back to LA is that it was West Coast has always been home and I was closer to my family over here, but I visit Charlottesville every chance I get.
Yeah. My sister lives in Seattle. She moved there and she just loves it. Now, how was it an adjustment? The people at UVA in Charlottesville, were they much different than LA and Seattle, or was that people are people wherever you are?
Yeah, not so much. I'd say the Southern hospitality is real. That so I appreciated that. But as far as anything else, there was the same passion, the same love for what everyone was doing. And I think that's a really great thing about working in athletics is that people love what they're doing every day and they bring that positive energy and just having the opportunity to have an impact on student athletes, I think everybody takes really seriously. So after was working at USC while I was a student there, and I was pleased to find that I enjoyed working at UVA just as much.
Yeah. Well, um, how did you get involved? You got the job with the football team. What was your goal in getting that job? And how did that come to be? You were international relations at USC, so
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily scream football,
Yeah,
maybe European football. So
exactly.
how did you get involved with the football team, and did you enjoy that work?
I did. So I had no intention of working in sports, but I grew up a big college sports fan. My dad played football at the University of Washington, so that was a big part of my life. But I didn't ever consider working in sports, and I thought I was going to go to DC and hence the international relations major. But when I was at USC, the football team posted an internship, and they were like, "You get free food, free shoes, you get to eat with the team after games." And well, throw in some other Nike gear. And I was like, great, I'll do this for fun, get to be down on the field at the Coliseum. Like, this will be a great way to enjoy college. And then I'll go start my career in DC. And I just loved it. I mean, it's so fast paced. It's so much fun. Of course, as a football fan, I mean, it's a dream job. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with this for a while and see where it takes me. And that was right before the pandemic and right before NIL changed. So I went home, was living in Seattle during the pandemic, and Virginia was the first team to start hiring out of that. So as soon of course, watching every single job board and when they posted the opportunity, I applied immediately. I was like, I don't know where Charlottesville is, but let's go. I just want to work in football. And that's kind of what brought me over there.
Did you meet Snoop Dogg on the USC sideline?
No, he came around once or twice, but I never got the chance to meet him.
Yeah. How about the violence of the game? Did that bother you at all?
No, not at all. I mean, I was used to it growing up. Of course, you always want to pray for player safety, but I think that's what we love about it, right?
Exactly. So, well, eventually, so how did the opportunity with the Cavalier Futures come to be? And my friend Lowe, and because you were operations assistant, was that also tied into NIL as well, or was
No.
okay? Good.
Yeah, actually not at all. And that's part of why I wanted to leave and to get into working in NIL. I had been blogging while I was at home during the pandemic, waiting for a football job to open up. I had been blogging about college sports, which turned into blogging about this NIL thing that was about to happen. And so I had had an interest in it for a while. I'd been following the development, but then focused on my operations job with the team. And I realized there's got to be somewhere in between where I can be doing NIL and focusing on it, but also maintaining athlete engagement, working with athletes and with a team. So I was looking for a role that would allow me to do that. And when Lo Davis was announced as the executive director, I was like, I don't know this guy, but I'm going to reach out and see if he needs any help. And I laugh, and I'm sure Lo still laughs because he agreed to go to breakfast with me, I'm sure as a courtesy. And I showed up with a printed out PowerPoint of what the collective needed to do, what it needed to be, our policies, the revenue streams, and how I was going to help them do that. So I pretty much forced him to give me a job, and I gave him the job description that I wanted. And I was also starting my master's at UVA. So I said, I'm not asking you to go full time. I'll give you 100%. I want to be involved in this. And so thankfully, he saw the vision and brought me on.
Yeah. So when you think of that PowerPoint that
Mhm.
got you the job, and you think of where NIL is now, were you in the ballpark? Was your vision on point?
Um, I I think I was on the right track, but even I had no idea just how much money was going to come into this space. I mean, I think the numbers that we're seeing players make these days are beyond what anyone would have expected even 2 or 3 years ago. So, I the bones were there, but I've been really surprised at just how much it has changed the recruiting game, right? Because it used to be about facilities and your official visit and the different like professional development opportunities that might come with going to a certain school. And those are all still important. You still do the visit, you still meet with the career center, but it's just become so much about the number and how they're going to support you, whether that's through the collective or through future revenue share opportunities. And that happened pretty quickly after NIL. I mean, it was always not allowed to use NIL offers as a recruiting inducement, at least at the beginning, but it's just blown up so much more than I think I could have expected.
Yeah. And when you think about UVA, what are some
Mhm.
of the challenges that UVA has with NIL? Is UVA in any better position or worse position than other schools with NIL? I would think, unlike, let's say, some of the southern schools like Ole Miss, Alabama, you have people that live in the state that have ownership over the sports programs that didn't even go to school there. I would
Mhm.
think some UVA's donors probably aren't as closely tied to sports as some other states. But that's just, I'm not sure if that's true. But what
Yeah.
are some of the challenges that UVA has with respect to NIL?
hmm I would say there are trade-offs because people always ask, is it better to be in a big city like UCLA or in a small town like UVA? And I think UVA has that advantage where people know UVA, they love UVA in the area, people are big fans, so they know who the players are. There's a little bit more familiarity. In the big city at UCLA, we're competing with Lakers, Clippers, Chargers, Rams. There's so much going on. Even just getting people to the stadium for our games is can be a struggle sometimes because you're competing with that big city lifestyle. And so I think the in terms of donor engagement and support, it seems like it's been going well from what I've been watching from afar. And I know Lo Davis is absolutely killing it. I'd say that's UVA's biggest advantage is having someone like him leading the way here. But yeah, I know it's we all wish we had SEC money, but it's been good to see them and Cav Futures grow and keep up in this space, especially as the transfer portal has really taken over.
Hmm. So you would say that UCLA is in no better position, if anything, maybe more of a challenge being competing with the Lakers and the Clippers and Rams and
Mhm.
than UVA does, not Rams, but competing than UVA does.
Yeah, I think it just changes the type of deals that the student athletes have available to them, right? Like in UCLA, we're right next to Hollywood. I was helping athletes be extras on TV shows and stunt doubles and video game body doubling and stuff like that. So you're really tapped in to the entertainment industry, whereas we don't have as many local business relationships. And you don't have, I think, as much buy-in even in your own neighborhood as UVA. So being kind of like having that local attraction and then those local relationships really go a long ways.
Yeah. Now the UVA's donors, like
Mhm.
a guy that I've interviewed, Barry Parkhill, who I'm sure you know from, he works in the Alumni Association or whatever it's called, and he takes general donations to the sports program, and you guys are NIL. Now,
Mhm.
is there a competition between those for donors? I mean, does it get a little bit confused when you have people that are donating generally, and then folks that have more targeted type NIL donations?
Yeah, I think that has been a challenge, mostly in the education, because NIL and the athletic department and the foundations, the goal is still to support student athletes and to keep our programs competitive. So the end goal is the same. There are just a lot of different ways to do that now. And so I think there was an adjustment period across all athletic departments to get the fundraising staff and the NIL team on the same page about how do we speak to donors about this? How do we educate them on where their money is going and why, and putting it in bucket A versus bucket B, because of course you want to maintain scholarships and keep your facilities up to date, and there are always going to be needs there. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have NIL support these days, you're not going to win. You're not going to get players. You're not going to be able to stay competitive. And so again, coming back to those end goals, stay competitive, support student athletes. I think people have gotten on the same page and are willing to kind of share the love, share the strategy there.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend who you may know named Trevor Freeland. I went to UVA with. He was a big swimmer there, and he supports the swim program. And I'm sure he's a big, he's incredibly successful. I'm sure he's a big donor there. Did the NIL made it easier for a guy like him to just target this swim program? Did that change anything for a donor like Trevor who loves swimming and wants to focus his giving on one particular sport?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's one of the really cool things about NIL and about a collective like Cav Futures is they're able to work with you directly. And if you even have not just an individual team, but an individual athlete that you want to support, you can see the direct impact of your money, and you can kind of dictate more of what you want to get out of that donation. Because, of course, you can get an autograph, you can get a meet and greet. I've helped arrange opportunities for athletes to coach, private coaching for kids or even attend a kid's birthday party. And so I think that it opens the door for a closer relationship, which is really cool. And as an alum of that sport, just how important your support is going to be, right? I think Lo always says, I love my UVA degree, but it never bought me lunch in college. And that's so true, is like outside of their sport, these are regular college students. And so money to go to the movies, to out to lunch, whatever it may be, that financial support can go a really long way.
Exactly. Now, I've heard that when an NIL deal is given to athletes, um, it's not necessarily a contract that's in concrete, and that there's a little bit of trust involved. Recently, I know someone whose son was thinking about moving schools, and they were offered a lot of money, but there wasn't a lot of certainty in how the money was given to them. Like there was no
Mhm.
like you get paid this much so and so. It's just like, well, we'll give you this, but there's some uncertainty to how they're going to receive the money. Is that true? And what are some of the ways in which athletes are paid, and what are some of the protections that they have?
Mhm. That's been one of the hardest parts of the NIL space, right? Is the shadier side to it, where people aren't always willing to put things in writing, and for a long time we're not able to put things in writing. I think we all remember the Tennessee getting busted, I think a year or two ago,
Yeah.
for a recruiting violation tied to NIL, and they turned around, sued the NCAA, and which resulted in an injunction against the recruiting rules. So a school still cannot and could not put an offer on in paper in front of a student athlete, but the injunction allowed collectives to start doing that. And so that changed a lot, because the collective at Tennessee and the court agreed the NCAA can't tell the collective that they can't meet with a recruit, offer a recruit an NIL sponsorship. So I think it's changed since that ruling to allow collectives to be a little bit more direct and offer, a real contract. But even then, they don't want to sign anything until you sign with the school. So just the timing of when you commit, when you sign, when you enroll, dictates a lot about how these deals are, executed.
Yeah. So I have another friend, or yeah, old acquaintance, but a guy I knew really well. His son signed a huge NIL contract, a huge contract, $3 million to play basketball with a big program. Actually, maybe USC. But anyway, it was massive.
Mhm.
And I just remember when I was talking to Lowe, it was all about, well, yeah, you can sign the money, but you gotta, there's a quid pro quo. You gotta show up for this. You gotta, you gotta wear the or whatever. But there's not even a pretense of that anymore, or even a whiff of that anymore. He's getting paid this much to go, and it seems to be a completely different um, negotiation than what Lowe and I talked about 3 years ago. Am I reading that right, or was this always in the background? It's just that was a part of the NIL that wasn't dominating at the time.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be the same. I won't throw my alma mater under the bus, but it's I think what's happened now is that they're still signing the same contracts. They're still signing the marketing deal to sign the basketball and do the meet and greets and show up to the community service. But the numbers have gotten so big that we know and everybody kind of accepts, yes, you're still signing the contract to do the fan engagement, but the money, you're getting $3 million, not because your autograph is worth $3 million, but because you're a $3 million basketball player. And so that's where I say we're embracing it as pay to play, because that the value of an autograph or a couple hours of community service, it is not at that level. And so people are seeing those numbers and they're like, all right, yeah, you can, we all know what's going on here.
So it's just how it's viewed and how it's interpreted. Nothing's really changed on paper.
Yeah, you're still supposed to have deliverables outside of your sport. So, at least according to where the NCAA rules are today, you can't get paid for anything related to athletic performance. So even if some of that contract said you'll get a bonus if you are MVP of the tournament, or you'll get a bonus if you hit this many points in the season, that's getting paid for athletic performance on paper. So you're not allowed to have any of those terms in there. Whereas, you know, if you are MVP of the tournament, we'll sign an addendum that says you do an extra social media post and then you get a boost for that social media post. So that's how people are kind of working around it.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to put all these things on paper because if you can't spell everything out and every circumstance out and how they're going to actually make that money back, how they're going to actually provide their name, image, and likeness to get the money. So I guess there's got to be kind of an open-endedness to the thing. Madeline, how has it affected other sports? Now, it seems like with the money that's being thrown around for football and basketball, now, I know there are, extremely attractive male and female athletes that have huge Instagram followings that have nothing to do with how good they are in the sport, but they are very attractive people, they're glamorous or whatever, and they have a following based on their social media presence, right? Um, are they still able to make a lot of money in other sports that aren't revenue sports like football and basketball?
Absolutely. And I tell athletes, if you want to earn NIL money, you have to be really, really good at your sport or really, really good at social media, ideally both. Because, there are influencers that have nothing to do with sports at all, right? You just think of those people who are just really consistent. And so we do see athletes across all sports who just own TikTok, or they're really good at Instagram, or they're a video game streamer, whatever it is, they're able to build up an audience that way. I've worked with a football player even who didn't touch the field for 3 years because of injuries, had 150,000 TikTok followers because he was just committed to it, and it's awesome. And I think the Walsh sisters at UVA are a great example of being really, really good at your sport, right? Because I think they're good creators and they have a great social media too, but really they're just the peak Olympian champion that we want to see in our Olympic sports. And so that is another example that I give when I'm like, look, get really good at your sport and it will come, or get really good at social media and the opportunities will find you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk. Let's say we're talking about that my friend's son before that's worth so much money, and I mean he's a top player and he had a good season. Let's say independently though he's also good at social media. Um, the money that he's being offered, would that reflect his social media, or is that a different income stream?
Mhm. So the money from the collective is probably going to be the same. They might give you a bonus or something. It's easier to justify giving them that money because you do have some fair market value with your social media. But what's going to happen for an athlete like that, who's good at both, is you're going to get your money from the collective and you're going to get really cool brand deals. So you're going to have Cheetos, Nike, Crocs, like those big house name brands that the students want to work with, they'll be reaching out as well. Whereas people love to use the offensive lineman example. There aren't too many offensive linemen, at least that I'm aware of, who are really into social media and lean into that. But they're getting a lot of NIL money because we need them so badly, and the collectives are coming after them. So I'd say that's the bigger difference is you're going to get your and donor funded NIL money, and you're going to get really cool brand sponsorships.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating how it's evolving, and it's exciting that there's different ways to be able to capitalize on it as well. Now, in terms of sports, let's independently of people's social media following, is it hurting certain sports, or because money has to be put aside because football is important at this college or basketball is important in this college, is it hurting the rowing program? Is it hurting the baseball program? Are schools having to eliminate programs? Or I did hear of one program going from Division 1 to Division 3. I forgot what college because they want to get out of the whole business of NIL. But is it hurting other? I don't want to say lesser sports, but at least revenue-wise, lesser sports.
So I think that's where we have to kind of differentiate between the true NIL, donor funded NIL, and then this new revenue share thing that's fallen under the umbrella of NIL.
Mhm.
And true NIL has helped sports across the board. I'd say that it's great to be able to see these student athletes leveraging their platforms. Even donor funded NIL has supported some other sports, we'll say the non-revenue sports, because some donors have used NIL as a way to add scholarships. We've had scholarship limits for a long time, but being able to provide tuition support through an NIL deal has been really, really valuable. I would say that the impact, the changes that we're seeing, teams switching from D1 to D3, or even GCU men's volleyball just announced that they're going to become a club team.
Is that Grand Canyon University?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep, Grand Canyon University. And they're a national championship program in that sport. They were reaching the Final Four, and now they've been demoted to a club team. I think we're seeing that, and we'll see more of that, not because of the true NIL side of it, but more so because of the revenue share and just the changing model where football continues to kind of dominate the resources, but it's also earning the resources. So seeing that split happen, and I don't know that that'll happen at every level or every school, but I think people are blaming NIL because NIL has become a very, very big umbrella, but it'll be whatever happens with the House case that has the biggest impact.
Yeah. When you think of the positives and negatives of NIL, is it different from female athletes than male athletes? Is it been, on the whole good for them in the same way as males, or it's been a little bit different for females?
Mhm. I think it's been good overall. The net impact has been a huge benefit to them because we see so many more female athletes who lean into social media, content creators. I think the influencer space is genuinely or generally dominated by women. So they're able to take advantage of that. Of course, there's always the downside that comes with more visibility of having weird people reaching out to you on social media. I've even had some athletes with stalkers. And so that's not great, but that was happening before NIL as well. And it's just brought more attention to the issue and also more resources and more education to online safety, privacy, making sure that we know how they're presenting themselves online, educating them on how to be safe and smart and not take any big risks with these opportunities. So overall, I think it's been great, and especially because it's been great for the schools as well, right? There are so many high profile female athletes who were able to build an audience around them and build a community around them. And I think NIL leveraged that. Caitlin Clark, Jordan Childs at UCLA, like they are another great example of great at their sport and building a great brand that makes people want to go see them. So they're selling tickets and everybody wins in that situation.
Yeah. How about programs that don't have football? So, like for example, VCU, used to be at UVA, so you're 60 miles from VCU. They're paying really solid NIL money to their basketball players because they don't have to worry about football. George Mason is paying huge NIL to their players because they don't have football and their team is doing really well. Have you seen a trend that schools that don't focus on football, maybe they have what they call college division football, they're able to use NIL in other ways that might be beneficial to those programs?
Definitely. And for basketball, that's where a lot of the money goes, but also for their Olympic sports. And moving forward, assuming that the House case passes, every school will have the same $20 million cap, but the majority of UCLA's $20 million, UVA's $20 million is going towards football. VCU put what you're going to put towards basketball, but you're probably not going to put all 20 million. So that leaves more support for your other sports as well. You're going to have more cap space for your non-revenue sports if you have the money to direct to them, and that's a big if. But we've seen that with some, Olympic sports where they're creating collectives for their water polo team, for their men's volleyball team. And so I think if you have the money, again, big if, it's an advantage because you're not so focused on directing everything to football. You can have more donor support in other areas.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's all in all, there's still a lot of things that are positive um, about the whole situation. Now there were some changes in the NCAA that I'm not sure if they're related to the NIL, but there probably were in some ways where they changed roster limits for a lot of sports. It wasn't a huge deal for football or basketball, but it was big for football. It was big for soccer. It went from 40 to 28 for roster size, but you can have as many scholarships as possible. What is the relation between NIL and these changes that the NCAA implemented in terms of rosters?
So those roster limits were tied into the House case, the House versus NCAA lawsuit. And so now Judge Wilkin on the House case has said, I don't like the roster cuts. You have to figure out a way to phase those in, or I'm not going to pass the settlement. And so it's those roster cuts have become a huge focus because so many schools, as soon as the NCAA said, we're probably going to do this, these are the numbers we're going to get to, they started making cuts immediately, cut staff because they were like, well, we don't have as many athletes anymore. And so that's a really hard thing to roll back. I'll be interested to see what compromise they offer to the judge to hopefully get her on board. But I think that was one of the unintended consequences of rushing through these changes and trying to get something figured out so quickly because more scholarships is great. And however, as we saw with all the blowback to the House settlement, there are so many athletes who are losing that opportunity. And we all love a good walk-on success story. And so yeah, the NCAA, it's been tough to follow that and to have that be tied into athletes getting more money, which is great. We should celebrate it. And the reality is that we can't have everything. And so this is one of the trade-offs.
Well, you mentioned that the judge is trying to walk it back, but I had two conversations in the last, 12 hours, and I wasn't even seeking these conversations, but I talked to an athlete who plays soccer locally who she was on the local college's roster for like 6 weeks practicing, but they cut their roster size to 28. So she's a really good player, so she's not going to be able to play next year. I talked to another guy whose daughter is going to a great school, a great private school that decided they have a new rule: no walk-ons. This is the first year of these rules. So although these rules, they're trying to walk back some of these decisions, the schools have already decided.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's gotten so complicated and people are so upset because and it's hard to blame the schools because I don't think they were given great guidance, and the NCAA was rash to say, all right, here's your roster cuts, get it down right now. And so the other question is they haven't provided schools with any guidance on eligibility, or because let's say the soccer player gets cut and she was playing scheduled to play this season, she gets cut because of the roster cuts. Did she just lose a year of eligibility because of the roster cut, or does she now get that year back should she get an opportunity somewhere else? And so those are some of the nitty-gritty questions that the settlement doesn't address.
Yeah. Well, one huge factor in college sports, and you alluded to it earlier, is the transfer portal, which is really interesting when you take a transfer portal with NIL because it becomes a bidding war at times. What are some of the ways that the transfer portal has affected NIL and vice versa?
Yeah. Well, one of the things about the transfer portal that don't think a lot of people recognize is how beneficial it's been to coaches in terms of determining their own roster. I think there are a lot more people who enter the portal because they've been told to get in the portal. Essentially, hey, man, if you ever want to play football, you got to go somewhere else. Like you can stay here, but you're not going to get any playing time. Of course, that kid's going to transfer, even if it's to a lesser school, because they want to play their sport. This is their only window to do that. So I think that's one thing about the transfer portal we don't talk about a lot is that, coaches love to hate on it, but I would guess a lot of those players, or at least a lot of the coaches who are complaining about it have told a player, go somewhere else, clear up a roster spot if you want to play again. So that's
Absolutely.
one thing. And the other part of it is, yeah, as you said, it's genuinely free agency with NIL offers and these transfer portal windows. So it's impacted so much.
Yeah, I really think it does give coaches a chance to win now. It used to be you had to go in, you had to build the program, you had to get some players. It took a while. Like for example, George Mason locally here, another one of your former uh, fellow Virginia schools. I think they lost not their 9 of the top 11 players last year. They went out and got 9 more great players, and they had an incredible year. Won the conference for the first time in I think the Sun Belt or the Sun Belt the first time in school history, and just had an amazing year. They're all new players, and they're able to redo the roster. They have a very dynamic young coach. So I definitely think you can win now, but it's different than the old days when you had to kind of build gradually. Um,
Yeah, and it's harder to sustain that winning because as soon as you show that you can win, your players just became that much more valuable. And I'll tell you, when I filled out my NCAA March Madness bracket this year, I chose 0 upsets. I was like, I think NIL is having that impact where the talent gap is getting bigger. And obviously it wasn't perfect, but I did pretty well. So it's
yeah.
interesting to see that happen as well.
It's a great point. It was a very chalky tournament this year. I think the NIL had a lot to do with it. I think also the 3-pointer has been neutralized. The teams are learning how to defend against a 3-pointer. So these little mid majors with these great shooters are having a hard time just getting hot and beating the big teams. That's not happening anymore. They know how to defend those 3-pointers. Well, let me ask you something about your career choices. Now, when you were a kid in Seattle growing up in the rain, you didn't dream about one day being in NIL. This career didn't exist, but yet, you have gotten in the trenches. You are an expert in NIL, and I've really enjoyed this discussion. You could talk effortlessly about some of the issues that are involved with the athletes and stuff. So this has been great. What do you think about it as a career path? What are some of the career paths in NIL? You mentioned you work for UCLA and UVA. Obviously, you have some agents involved. What are some of the career paths that have sprung up around NIL?
Mhm. Yeah, great question. So I've jumped around a lot, even in between working for USC and working for UVA. I worked for an NIL startup briefly.
Oh,
And so yeah, people come to me all the time and say, I want to work in NIL. And I ask them, what do you mean when you say that? Because there's startups, there's a lot of tech companies that have gotten involved, financial advisors or smaller agencies. So there's this like third party bucket. And then you have collectives, which are independent companies, but still tied to schools. You're still interacting with athletes. And then you have the schools themselves. And there are trade-offs depending on which bucket you want to put yourself in. When I was with the collective, I had a little bit more autonomy. It was very creative, very entrepreneurial because we were building the company, but also selling deals, sponsorships, executing contracts. Like it was really fun. Um, and but the school offered a little bit more long-term stability for me because there was 9 to 5 office on campus every single day, and I liked that. I'm a very structure-oriented person. And then that third bucket, those third parties, the agencies, the startups, the tech companies, those are probably going to be the most autonomous. You're not worried about NCAA compliance every single day, but you're building your company and doing cool things. So when people say, I want to work in NIL, I ask them, well, like I said, what does that mean? Because what's important to you? Do you want to be wheeling and dealing and selling deals and working with athletes as an agent? Do you want to be building a tech startup? Do you want to be like me in the compliance office every day, 9 to 5? Because the different career paths that are opening up are fit for different people. I don't think everyone could jump between all of those.
It's like saying you want to work in Hollywood. Well,
Yeah.
what exactly you want to do in Hollywood?
In front of the
You know,
camera, behind the camera, what do you want?
yeah, exactly. When you think about careers, um, you know, your generation, I have a son who's 21, so he's a little bit younger than you at UVA. And I have a daughter at JMU, and I have a high school kid. So I don't really, I hope I know my kids, but I don't know what your generation wants. I mean, do you guys want to get a job with these huge corporations and work for 30 years? Or do jobs like NIL, if with it has no track record for being a sustainable type of industry, is that what your generation feeds on? Is this the kind of thing that your generation goes for?
Yeah, so my opinion is that those long-term careers don't really work anymore. And I'll give the example of working in college sports right now. So my next step, I don't know if I've told you this is announcement to the podcast, but I'm starting law school in the fall.
Okay,
And yeah, so the reason,
congratulations.
thank you. That's a big part of my transformation right now. And reason I'm doing that is because I was watching the college sports industry change, and I was watching who was getting these new roles opening up, right? The new third floor jobs that I call them, the essentially those advisors to the athletic director, the new chief revenue officers, chief development officers, they're getting hired from outside of college sports. And I think as the industry changes, more and more opportunities will open up for subject matter experts, as opposed to people who have been in college sports for a long time, kind of waiting their turn. And um, that's a big change as college sports professionalize more and more. They're going to continue stealing from pro teams. They're going to continue stealing from big consultants, continue stealing from agencies. And so I wanted to prepare to be more of a subject matter expert and be qualified for those opportunities. And I think people in our generation have to jump around a little bit more to get the experience for these new jobs that are opening up. I tell people at UCLA, my job didn't exist 2 years ago. I'm the first person to have the assistant director of NIL role, and who knows what kind of jobs will be opening up 2 years from now, even. So, yeah, I think you just have to have a variety of experience to be prepared for whatever happens.
Yeah. Well, on a scale of 0 to 100, what are the chances that you get back into sports when you're out of law school? Maybe you'll end up being a defense attorney somewhere.
Yeah, I hope 100. That's the goal. My guess is student or football teams in particular, some basketball teams, they're hiring general managers right now. But I'm thinking the next hire will be in-house counsel, right? Because you have a GM who probably has a scouting background, very focused on roster building, roster management. But there are so many contracts at play these days. You sign a contract with the collective, a contract with your agent, a contract with the school. Everything's getting negotiated. There are so many lawsuits against the NCAA. Agent or athletes and athletic departments are just going to need more lawyers. And so defense attorney, maybe, but I'm hoping some sort of advisor or in-house counsel where I can kind of add value and stay close to a football program.
Yeah. Quick question. So I need your advice. My son wants to go to law school. He's a third year at UVA. He's a brilliant student, and I think he'd be a great lawyer. I'm just a little worried about the climate with law firms now. Do you still think law schools are cost effective? The money you spend in, you'll be able to get it back?
Mhm. I think probably depends on exactly what type of law he wants to go into, but I do think there are more and more opportunities opening up where a law degree can add value, but you're not necessarily practicing as an attorney. Um, and I would also tell him to get work experience first because that helped me so much to just develop more professionalism, new skills, and kind of go back to law school knowing 100% this is what I want to do. This is how I know this is going to benefit me. So if you work, you can save a little money, and just go into law school more self-assured that you know what you're doing and know what path you're on. But I'm just crossing my fingers for myself too. I'll let you know in 3 years.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch. A question for you, maybe last question for you. I'm kind of jumping backwards a little bit, but so there, in Northern Virginia, there's a football academy that's coming up, and the St. James. I'm not sure if you heard of it. It's this big sports complex, and they're kind of doing the IMG models, and they're bringing kids in, and they're spending big money on coaches. And the kids are getting like online school, but they're all going to the academy every day, and they're training all day. I don't know. This is not kind of high school I want my kid to go to. I want my kid to go to prom and do all the things that you do in high school. But these kids and parents are laser focused on their future. Um, in the past, I would have advised against this. So this is crazy. Very few people make pros. Who knows what's going to happen? You can get hurt, blah, blah, blah. Now with NIL, there's a chance they can make more money as a freshman in college than most people make at their 10th year working in whatever career they chose. So I have a hard time giving people that kind of advice anymore because I don't know what the world looks like.
Yeah.
Am I right to kind of feel that way and that,
Yeah.
maybe they should go all in on a football career in college?
Yeah, I get it. I get why people are gravitating towards that because it's true. It's you don't have to make the pros to make money in football. You can make money at 18. And NIL in a lot of states is available to high school athletes. So, and I believe it is in Virginia. Theoretically, we could get to a point where you're getting brand sponsorships and you're getting NIL money as a high school athlete. So I get it, but I will say I think talent is going to be discovered no matter what. If you're committed to your sport, if you have what it takes to play at the next level, they will find you. These scouts behind these college teams are insane and they're really good at their jobs. And so I don't think you have to do that, but I understand why people are gravitating towards it.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Talent will find a way. Um, Look, Madeline, this has been so nice. I'm so glad you agreed to talk to me. You know so much. You're very impressive. I have no doubt you're going to do amazing in law school and do great things afterwards. Hopefully, we can keep in touch. You can let me know how things are going. But I learned so much, and I just really appreciate your time. And I just wish you the best of luck at everything you try.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I just can't give Lo Davis enough flowers. He was such a great friend and mentor to me. And I really, really wish I could steal him and clone him and just bring him over to UCLA, and wherever I go. But the Who's are very lucky to have him.
Yeah, UCLA, you guys are fine. You got all those, big names, Hollywood types. Let Lowe is a Virginia country boy. Let Lowe stay here and do his thing for us.
He's a Cavalier through and through. So
Exactly. So you're not gonna take it away from us.
darn
So
it. All right. Well, thank you. But tell him I say hi.
I
And
should,
I'm gonna be at a football game in Charlottesville this year. You never know.
yeah,
So
hopefully maybe we can connect in person one of these
yeah,
days.
that'd
Yeah.
be great.
Okay, great, Madeline. Nice
All
meeting
right.
you.
Have a good one.
Thanks again. You
Bye.
too. Bye.